Vilfredo Federico Damaso Paretu was an Italian engineer, sociologist, economist, political scientist, and philosopher. He made several important contributions to economics, particularly in the study of income distribution and in the analysis of individuals' choices. He was also responsible for popularizing the use of the term elite in social analysis. He introduced the concept of Pareto efficiency and helped develop the field of microeconomics. He was also the first to discover that income follows a Pareto distribution, which is a power law probability distribution. The Pareto principle was named after him and built on observations of his such as that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. He also contributed to the fields of sociology and mathematics. According to the mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot and Richard L. Hudson, his legacy as an economist was profound. Partly because of him, the field evolved from a branch of moral philosophy as practiced by Adam Smith into a data-intensive field of scientific research and mathematical equations. His books look more like modern economics than most other texts of that day: tables of statistics from across the world and ages, rows of integral signs and equations, intricate charts and graphs. Biography: Pareto was born of an exiled noble Genoese family in 1848 in Paris, the center of the popular revolutions of that year. His father, Raffaele Pareto, was an Italian civil engineer and Ligurian marquis who had left Italy much like Giuseppe Mazzini and other Italian nationalists. His mother, Marie Metenia, was a French woman. Enthusiastic about the 1848 German Revolution, his parents named him Fritz Wilfrid, which became Vilfredo Federico upon his family's move back to Italy in 1858. In his childhood, Pareto lived in a middle-class environment, receiving a high standard of education. In 1869, he earned a doctor's degree in engineering from what is now the Polytechnic University of Turin. His dissertation was entitled The Fundamental Principles of Equilibrium in Solid Bodies. His later interest in equilibrium analysis in economics and sociology can be traced back to this paper. From civil engineer to liberal, and then to economist. For some years after graduation, he worked as a civil engineer, first for the state-owned Italian railway company and later in private industry. He was manager of the iron works of San Giovanni Valdarno and later general manager of Italian Iron Works. He did not begin serious work in economics until his mid-40s. He started his career a fiery liberal, besting the most ardent British liberals with his attacks on any form of government intervention in the free market. In 1886 he became a lecturer on economics and management at the University of Florence. His stay in Florence was marked by political activity, much of it fueled by his own frustrations with government regulators. In 1889, after the death of his parents, Pareto changed his lifestyle, quitting his job and marrying a Russian, Alessandrina Barknin. She left him in 1902 for a young servant. Economics and sociology. In 1893, he succeeded La Copyright on Walras to the chair of political economy at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland, where he remained for the rest of his life. In 1906, he made the famous observation that 20% of the population owned 80% of the property in Italy, later generalized by Joseph M. Urin into the Pareto principle. In one of his books published in 1909 he showed the Pareto distribution of how wealth is distributed, he believed through any human society, in any age, or country. He maintained cordial personal relationships with individual socialists, but always thought their economic ideas were severely flawed. He later became suspicious of their humanitarian motives and denounced socialist leaders as an aristocracy of brigands who threatened to despoil the country and criticized the government of Giovanni Giolitti for not taking a tougher stance against worker strikes. Growing unrest among labor in Italy led him to the anti-socialist and anti-democratic camp. His attitude toward fascism in his last years is a matter of controversy. Personal life. In 1923 Pareto remarried with Jeanne Regis, just before he died in Geneva, Switzerland, August 19, 1923, among a menagerie of cats that he and his French lover kept in their villa. The local divorce laws prevented him from divorcing his wife and remarrying until just a few months prior to his death. Sociology. Paratou's later years were spent in collecting the material for his best-known work, Trattato di Sociologia Generale. His final work was Compendio di Sociologia Generale. In his Trattato di Sociologia Generale, published in English by Harcourt, Brace in a 4-volume edition edited by Arthur Livingston under the title The Mind and Society, Paratou developed the notion of the circulation of elites, the first social cycle theory in sociology. He is famous for saying history is a graveyard of aristocracies. Paratou seems to have turned to sociology for an understanding of why his abstract mathematical economic theories did not work out in practice, in the belief that unforeseen or uncontrollable social factors intervened. His sociology holds that much social action is non-logical and that much personal action is designed to give spurious logicality to non-rational actions. We are driven, he taught, by certain residues, and by derivations from these residues. The more important of these have to do with conservatism and risk-taking, and human history is the story of the alternate dominance of these sentiments in the ruling elite, which comes into power strong in conservatism but gradually changes over to the philosophy of the foxes, or speculators. A catastrophe results, with a return to conservatism. The lion mentality follows. This cycle might be broken by the use of force, says Paratou, but the elite becomes weak and humanitarian and shrinks from violence. Paratou's sociology was introduced to the United States by George Homans and Lawrence J. Henderson at Harvard, and had considerable influence, especially on Harvard sociologist Alsop Parsons, who developed a systems approach to society and economics that argues the status quo is usually functional. Paratou was a lifelong opponent of Marxism. Fascism and power distribution, Binauer registered trademark T. Mandelbrot writes. One of Paratou's equations achieved special prominence, and controversy. He was fascinated by problems of power and wealth. How do people get it? How is it distributed around society? How do those who have it use it? The gulf between rich and poor has always been part of the human condition, but Paratou resolved to measure it. He gathered reams of data on wealth and income through different centuries, through different countries, the tax records of Basel, Switzerland, from 1454 and from Augsburg, Germany, in 1471, 1498 and 1512. Contemporary rental income from Paris. Personal income from Britain, Prussia, Saxony, Ireland, Italy, Peru. What he found a euro, or thought he found a euro, was striking. When he plotted the data on graph paper, with income on one axis, and number of people with that income on the other, he saw the same picture nearly everywhere in every era. Society was not a social pyramid with the proportion of rich to poor sloping gently from one class to the next. Instead it was more of a social arrow, a euro very fat on the bottom where the mass of men live, and very thin at the top where sit the wealthy elite. Nor was this effect by chance. The data did not remotely fit a bell curve, as one would expect if wealth were distributed randomly. It is a social law, he wrote, something in the nature of man. Paratou's discovery that power laws applied to income distribution embroiled him in political change and the nascent fascist movement, whether he really sided with the fascists or not. Fascists such as Mussolini found inspiration for their own economic ideas in his discoveries. He had discovered something that was harsh and Darwinian, in Paratou's view. And this fueled both the anger and the energy of the fascist movement because it fueled their economic and social views. He wrote that, as Mandelbrot summarizes, at the bottom of the wealth curve, he wrote, men and women starve and children die young. In the broad middle of the curve all is turmoil and motion, people rising and falling, climbing by talent or luck and falling by alcoholism, tuberculosis and other kinds of unfitness. At the very top sit the elite of the elite, who control wealth and power for a time a euro until they are unseated through revolution or upheaval by a new aristocratic class. There is no progress in human history. Democracy is a fraud. Human nature is primitive, emotional, unyielding. The smarter, abler, stronger, and shrewder take the lion's share. The weak starve, lest society become degenerate. One can, Pareto wrote, compare the social body to the human body, which will promptly perish if prevented from eliminating toxins. Inflammatory stuff and it burned Pareto's reputation. Pareto had argued that democracy was an illusion and that a ruling class always emerged and enriched itself. For him, the key question was how actively the rulers ruled. For this reason he called for a drastic reduction of the state and welcomed Benito Mussolini's rule as a transition to this minimal state so as to liberate the pure economic forces. To quote Pareto's biographer, "In the first years of his rule Mussolini literally executed the policy prescribed by Pareto, destroying political liberalism, but at the same time largely replacing state management of private enterprise, diminishing taxes on property, favoring industrial development, imposing a religious education and dogmas." Karl Popper dubbed him the theoretician of totalitarianism, but there is no evidence in Popper's published work that he read Pareto in any detail before repeating what was then a common but dubious judgment in anti-fascist circles. It is true that Pareto regarded Mussolini's triumph as a confirmation of certain of his ideas, largely because Mussolini demonstrated the importance of force and shared his contempt for bourgeois parliamentarism. He accepted a royal nomination to the Italian Senate from Mussolini. But he died less than a year into the new regime's existence. Some fascist writers were much enamored of Pareto, writing such paeans as, "Just as the weaknesses of the flesh delayed, but could not prevent, the triumph of St. Augustine, so a rationalistic vocation retarded but did not impede the flowering of the mysticism of Pareto." For that reason, fascism, having become victorious, extolled him in life, and glorifies his memory, like that of a confessor of its faith. But many modern historians reject the notion that Pareto's thought was essentially fascistic or that he is properly regarded as a supporter of fascism. Economic concepts. Pareto theory of maximum economics. Pareto turned his interest to economic matters and he became an advocate of free trade, finding himself in difficulty with the Italian government. His writings reflected the ideas of La Copyright on Wolvers that economics is essentially a mathematical science. Pareto was a leader of the Lausanne School, and represents the second generation of the neoclassical revolution. His tastes and obstacles approach to general equilibrium theory were resurrected during the Great Parisian Revival of the 1930s and have influenced theoretical economics since. In his Manual of Political Economy the focus is on equilibrium in terms of solutions to individual problems of objectives and constraints. He used the indifference curve of Edgeworth extensively, for the theory of the consumer and, another great novelty, in his theory of the producer. He gave the first presentation of the trade-off box now known as the Edgeworth-Bowley box. Pareto was the first to realize that cardinal utility could be dispensed with and economic equilibrium thought of in terms of ordinal utility that is, it was not necessary to know how much a person valued this or that, only that he preferred X of this to Y of that. Utility was a preference ordering. With this, Pareto not only inaugurated modern microeconomics, but he also demolished the alliance of economics and utilitarian philosophy. He replaced it with the notion of Pareto optimality, the idea that a system is enjoying maximum economic satisfaction when no one can be made better off without making someone else worse off. Pareto optimality is widely used in welfare economics and game theory. A standard theorem is that a perfectly competitive market creates distributions of wealth that are Pareto optimal. Concepts some economic concepts in current use are based on his work. The Pareto index is a measure of the inequality of income distribution. He argued that in all countries and times, the distribution of income and wealth is highly skewed, with a few holding most of the wealth. He argued that all observed societies follow a regular logarithmic pattern, where n is the number of people with wealth higher than x, and a and m are constants. Over the years, Pareto's law has proved remarkably close to observed data. The Pareto chart is a special type of histogram, used to view causes of a problem in order of severity from largest to smallest. It is a statistical tool that graphically demonstrates the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule. Pareto's law concerns the distribution of income. The Pareto distribution is a probability distribution used, among other things, as a mathematical realization of Pareto's law. Offer limit is a measure of purely economic satisfaction. Major works: Vilfredo Pareto. Cowers da Permilconomie Politique Professor Copyright à l'Université Copyright de Lausanne. Vol. I, 1896. Vol. II, 1897. Vilfredo Pareto. Les Systèmes Socialistes. 1902. Vilfredo Pareto. Manual of Political Economy 1906. Vilfredo Pareto. Trattato di Sociologia Generale G. Barber Copyright RA, 1916. Works in English translation equals, The Mind and Society, Vol. 4, New York, Harcourt, Brace and Company, 1935. The Mind and Society, Vol. 3, Vol. 4, London, Jonathan Cape, 1936. The Ruling Class in Italy Before 1900, S.F. Vanni 1950. Intalsot Parsons, Theories of Society. Foundations of Modern Sociological Theory, 2 vol., The Free Press of Glencoe, Incorporated, 1961. The Circulation of Elites, pages 551–557. The Use of Force in Society, pages 589–597. Combinations and Group Persistence, pages 780–786. On Logical and Non-Logical Action, pages 1061–1062. On the Equilibrium of the Social Systems, pages 1288–1291. Cycles of Interdependence, pages 1381–1385. Sociological Writings, Praeger, 1966. Manual of Political Economy, Augustus M. Kelly, 1971. The Transformation of Democracy, Transaction Books, 1984. The Rise and Fall of Elites, An Application of Theoretical Sociology, Transaction Publishers, 1991. Articles The Parliamentary RA Copyright Geiman Italy, Political Science Quarterly, Vol. 8, Ginn and Company, 1893. The New Theories of Economics, Journal of Political Economy, Volume 5, No. 4, September, 1897. An Italian View, The Living Age, November 1922. See also, Pareto Efficiency, Pareto Distribution, Pareto Principle, Elite Theory. References. Further reading, V. Pareto, Cowers da Euro Unregistered Trademark Economie Politique. Droz, Geneva, 1896. Amoruso, Luigi. Vilfredo Pareto, Econometrica, Volume 6, No. 1, January, 1938. Aron, Raymond. Main Currents in Sociological Thought, Durkheim, Pareto, Weber Euro Volume 2 Online Edition. Excerpt and text search, Bruno, G. Pareto, Vilfredo The New Palgrave, A Dictionary of Economics, v. 5, pages 799–804. Bisino, Giovanni. The Signification of Vilfredo Pareto Euro Unregistered Trademark S. Sociology, Review Europa Copyright and des Sciences Sociales, XXVI, 2000. Cirillo, Renato. Was Vilfredo Pareto really a precursor of fascism? The American Journal of Economics and Sociology, Volume 42, No. 2, April, 1983. Cirillo, Renato. The Economics of Vilfredo Pareto, E. Sermon, G. 2001. Pareto, Vilfredo, International Encyclopedia of the Social and Behavioral Sciences, pages 11,048–11,051. Abstract. Femia, Joseph V. Pareto and Political Theory. Excerpt and text search, Homans, George C., and Charles P. Curtis Jr. An Introduction to Pareto, His Sociology Online Edition, Kerman, A. P. Pareto as an Economist. The New Palgrave, A Dictionary of Economics, v. 5, pages 804-08. Livingston, Arthur. Vilfredo Paratú, A Biographical Portrait, The Saturday Review, May 25, 1935. Millikan, Max. Paratú's Sociology, Econometrica, Volume 4, No. 4, October, 1936. Osipova, Elena. Translated by H. Campbell Creighton, M.A. The Sociological System of Vilfredo Paratú in Igakun, A History of Classical Sociology, Moscow, Progress Publishers, pages 312-336, Palder, Philip. Paratú's Republic and the New Science of Peace, 2011, 1, chapters online. Published by Cooper Wolfling. ISBN 978-0-9877880-9, Parsons, Talsott. The Structure of Social Action, The Free Press, 1949. Tarascio, Vincent J. Paratú's Methodological Approach to Economics, A Study in the History of Some Scientific Aspects of Economic Thought, 1968. Online edition, Forte F., Silvestri P., Paratú Unregistered Trademark S. Sociological Maximum of Utility of the Community and the Theory of the Elites, in J. G. Backhorse, Essentials of Fiscal Sociology. Conceptions of an Encyclopedia, Peter Lang, Frankfurt am Main, 2013, pages 231-265. Primary sources Paratú, Vilfredo. The Mind and Society, Trattato di Sociologia Generale. Harcourt, Brace. External links, further information from New School University, review materials for studying Vilfredo Paratú, Vilfredo Paratú. The Concise Encyclopedia of Economics. Library of Economics and Liberty, 2008. Vilfredo Paratú, A Concise Overview of His Life, Works, and Philosophy, by Fr. James Thornton, Works by Vilfredo Paratú at Project Gutenberg, Works by or about Vilfredo Paratú at Internet Archive, The Mind and Society.